It may not surprise you to hear that I didn't actually watch the French Olympics opening ceremony at the weekend. However, I almost invariably read Tim Stanley in the Daily Telegraph, and today was no different. At the Olympics, they often sing Imagine, containing the line, "Imagine there's no countries." Well, if there were no countries, there'd be no Olympics, which would be marvellous. Nonetheless, it seems the ceremony celebrated less of France and its history and culture and wonderful food and foie gras and things, and instead delivered a medley of drag queens, that's men wearing women's clothes, and interpretive dance. Well, I'm joined by my panel, the self-same Telegraph columnist Tim Stanley and the author and broadcaster Amy Nicole Turner. Amy, were you inspired to see the Last Supper with people in fancy dress?
Honestly, I just didn't feel much about it because I've seen the Last Supper depicted so many different ways. My mum actually has a picture by the artist J.J. Abrams with the characters from Pulp Fiction in the Last Supper. So I just didn't really understand it. Now, I appreciate it has caused massive offence, and I totally respect that, but surely that is part of freedom of speech, which we all stand for, that I have the freedom to say it, you have the freedom to be offended by it, and thus it shall continue.
Isn't Amy right? And Tim, have you just come on essentially to sing the English are best, and tell the French or whatever it is they do?
Oh, no. I suspect if Britain ran the Olympics in 2024, it'd be even worse. I've no doubt about that. No, I'm not against a fun, light-hearted parody of The Last Supper. I think the problem was this was tacky, it was gross, and it just felt like a lazy kick down at Christians and just a lazy bit of blasphemy. Which was, in the column, I emphasised that I really found the whole thing just sort of trashy. And I was sort of wondering in the course of writing this, why do people feel this instinctive need to blaspheme? And why do people poke fun at religious art and things like that? And I think that part of it's because it is beautiful. And sometimes people are so unused to beauty, we're so steeped in ugliness in our everyday lives, that when we do encounter something beautiful, it's just a sort of sometimes sometimes you feel awe, sometimes you feel unnerved by it, and some people feel actually angry about it. And that's what I think motivates a lot of this sort of thing, is that people are trying to drag religious beauty down to a level that they can understand.
Literally drag.
Yes, literally drag it.
See, but then I find drag really beautiful, and it does have a place in French history. The French have done drag before we did, even. So there is a part of French culture. Also, it was the cast of RuPaul's Drag Race from France, but then they've come out and said it wasn't even the Last Supper anyway. So
Joan of Arc dressed up as a man.
It's the Feast of Dionysus, in fact, this piece, which would make a lot more sense because Olympics, ancient Greece, seems to fit a bit more sensibly.
But I think the drag element is, again, another reason why one objects to it, because I entirely agree with you. Drag's great fun. I love drag. And to me, drag is a bloke in a pub dressed as Barbara Cartland telling filthy jokes about foreigners. That's what it normally is. But in the last 10 years, it's become heavily politicised. And let's be honest, that is about making a political statement about drag and what it stands for. And the association of that with religious imagery just makes it all the more, to use a horrible modern word, problematic.
See, I think people feel that perhaps the only reason people have been offended by this is solely because it is drag and because it is related to the LGBT scene, and that's the undertone that people are finding offensive.
And that's true.
That they're finding homophobia in the reaction.
And I think that's partly true because A, it's political, and B, it's sexualised. Drag is highly sexual. And the association of that religious imagery is in many people's minds just not appropriate.
What I think is Tim's fundamental point, that revolutionaries like to destroy beauty. So if you look at the communists, they were always destroying beauty. If you look at the Taliban, they've been in favour of destroying beauty. It's what revolutionaries do, because beauty frightens them, because beauty appeals to our basic understanding of the divine and draws us towards it, and that the atheistic cult that we currently have is anti-beauty.
I cannot see anything that wasn't beautiful. I can see it wasn't traditional.
What?
I can say it wasn't traditional. But that is so incredibly subjective.
It is subjective, but it was clearly hideous. Anybody watching it, some great
all of aesthetics
in the middle.
All of aesthetics are completely
drag queens twerking on a bridge in the rain.
They were not twerking.
One of whom looked like...
One had a beard.
But why is that? Why is that something that isn't beautiful?
There was no beauty in it. minute. I mean, it's very good of you to come on and argue this line.
To try to pretend that ugliness is beautiful is the revolution reduced to its essential core.
Of inclusivity in that image is something very beautiful, and I'm sure that's what the creative director wanted to communicate. For heaven's sake, there is no beauty in that.
It's completely hideous and ridiculous.
I think that's a lot more interesting and beautiful than the original if it was The Last Supper.
I'm not worried about The Last Supper. I think God can deal with blasphemy and will do on the final day of judgment. But that beauty we can deal with in this life.
Yeah, and I think it's very interesting that you use the word interesting. You say you think it's as beautiful or interesting as the original Last Supper. Why is it interesting? Because it's novel.
It's current.
Because the thing about, it's current. Whereas religious art is transcendent. It's timeless. Its beauty is beautiful in all times, regardless of fashion.
We will move on to another beautiful thing.
Imitation is the greatest form of flattery, then.
Amy, I will let you